start anytime.
Well, good morning. So far, we've only got Orson and I and Jennifer, but this is going to be recorded so you can pick it up and join in it. And let's say next Thursday, we'll do it again. We'll alternate from Wednesdays to Thursdays because on Wednesdays, I'll be up at church. Remember, this will be recorded. So if you miss today and your homework assignment, it will all be recorded. We're going to talk about the prophets. Now, why talk about the prophets now? Well, the prophets are the ones who move us from judgment to hope. Let me repeat that again. From judgment to hope. They are the ones who fire our imaginations, who ask us two important questions. And I'm going to use that great legendary philosopher Thomas Magliozzi, who was part of the wonderful dynamic duo of Car Talk. This is how most of us see what prophets do. The hairy guy on the street, the end is near. And the guy saying, is that a good thing or a bad thing? We have to be honest that sometimes the end is a beginning. And that's what the prophets are going to do. We kind of focus them more on God's judgment than God's hope. God's judgment is this is what's going to happen. It's the Surgeon General's label on the pack of cigarettes. It's the annoying little light and beeper that says you're not wearing your seatbelt, because if you do, things are going to happen. Again, two key phrases from the legendary Tommy Magliozzi. Are you wacko? Can you not see is a term the prophets use a heck of a lot. Can you not see? Do you as yet not know or understand? God is doing a new thing. God is in a different direction than where you're at. And then unencumbered by the rational thought process. Prophets ignite our imagination and dare us to hope against hope, dare us to hope against logic, dare us to try something new. What makes someone a prophet? Again, remember that they not only talk about judgment, but most importantly, they call us to hope. Hope, remember in Hebrew, is the word for umbilical cord, a connection in your time when things seem silent, things seem crashing in. There is a new and lively hope, a new and lively hope. And if you don't believe it, you don't see it, you're wacko. You've got to let God be God. Well, now that I've gotten those 2 points, which are big ones for understanding, let's go through the prophets a little bit. We have Samuel and Nathan. Samuel is one of the first, pardon me, although not the first, but one of the first big prophets. He is the one that says, my ways are not your ways, says God, and I don't do the things you would do. Remember, Samuel picks David, who's so insignificant. He's the redheaded boy that Jethro doesn't even bring him to show Samuel. Samuel is the one that tells Saul, you know, you've been doing things your way. Why don't you try God's thing? And if you don't, these are the consequences. Samuel is the one that reminds people of consequences. But remember, he's not the first. Parallel with Samuel is Nathan. Nathan is the one who barges in to David and Beersheba in the honeymoon suite of the Jerusalem Hilton and says, you know, you can't make people disposable. You cannot kill someone and then say you speak for God. And he institutes what I call basic Old Testament justice. This is what you've done. These are the consequences. Greatest example of this ever was in a talk show, and there was a guy who was running for political office, yelling and screaming and having a great rant and rave against an anti-culture that would provide him, that would stop him from talking on the car phone whenever he wanted to. And all of a sudden, after he takes a deep breath, you hear this loud crash. And the guy says, you know, I just hit somebody. The guy at the other end says, serves you right. That's basic Old Testament justice. But we're going to move on some more. We're going to name some other folks. Let's go to the women on this one. Let's not forget the women, because everybody always says, well, you know, this patriarchal, rotten old bunch of men. But women play a key part. When everybody else is just gobsmacked and codswalloped and shamboozled by what God has done to Pharaoh's terrorist army, it's Miriam who says this is only the beginning. And she has the first, as far as we know it, conga line that goes dancing and proclaiming the power of God. Miriam proclaims the power of God. Remember that all the men and everybody are saying, we're going to die, we're going to die, we're going to die. But it's Moses and the women that says, we're going to live. New reality, unencumbered by the rational thought process. Rational thought process, well, you know, Pharaoh's got all the power, Pharaoh's got all the might, there's the sea, we're never going to get through it. That's bogus. That's another key prophetic word from Thomas Magliozzi. Bogus. The power structures that we talk about, and by power structures, I mean the scripts we read from, are bogus. God does something new. Peter will be an exponent of this in the book of Acts. I'm persuaded that God does new things. Next, Deborah, probably the greatest of all the judges, the only one that doesn't have feet of clay. She is the one who organizes the resistance against the Hittites and all the other terrorist armies. My personal favorite was also known as Hulda. Sounds like a good German woman's name. They always have such wonderful women's names. Anyway, Josiah, who is the king, this is about the 600s, cleans up the temple. And all of a sudden, people come across this box, okay? Let's call it what it is. Good morning, John. I hope you're in on this. Anyway, welcome, John. Welcome. Hopefully some other folks will come up. We're talking about the women prophets. We're talking about Huldah or Hurika, who, when all the pagan idols are cleaned out of the temple, there is this big giant box with angels on the corner. What is it? And what's inside here? The chief priest, the powers that be, don't even know. What is it? It's the Ark of the Covenant. What's inside? Remember, that's always the big question. It's the 10 Commandments. That's how whack people are. They don't even remember the 10 Commandments. Prophets bring us back to where we need to be. Noadiah, there's one that just, is obviously on the top 10. I had to look her up. She is one who, when they are rebuilding after the Babylonian captivity, begins to talk about, you divided this whole thing up to the haves and the have-nots, and guess what? That's not the way God works. God wants all his people to be together. It's a reaction against the power politics of Ezra and Nehemiah. And the book of Ruth will come from that. Remember the line of David, which you loudly talk about? Well, guess what? It begins with a pagan woman. Again, women are part of the process. It's just a shame we don't know if there were more. Let's go back to the main prophets. Bear with us. There we go. Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. What do they have in common? They are all part of the ruling class, which is kind of, we don't normally think of the prophets as being part of the ruling class. They're the guys that are always dredging people down. Isaiah was part of the princely family. He was as close to the king as you can get, and he will inspire a whole school of prophecy that will go throughout the Old Testament. These prophets are from the 760 BC to about the 540 and 400s. Just to give you an idea, if you think of Samuel and Nathan, they're 950. Some of the women prophets go anywhere from the 1100s to, I would say, the 3 to 400s. Isaiah, part of the royal family. Jeremiah, part of the priestly family. Ezekiel, part of the priestly family. Indeed, he probably was a priest. Jeremiah is kind of kicked out of the priesthood for all of his stuff. And Ezekiel is someone who calls things as they are. He's part of the priestly tradition and the priestly family. There's a lot of great stuff in Ezekiel that talks about what it is to be a priest and how he literally takes into himself the word of God, which is a powerful thing. He's also the one, the prophecy of the dry bones. We'll be spending more time with Isaiah. The reason I'm going to back off with Jeremiah for a while, Jeremiah's language is so incredibly raw. It's so accusatory that I'd rather not deal with it for now. A big thing that you'll know about Jeremiah, like Hosea, who is a contemporary, is, again, he moves us from judgment to hope. At the end of all this, after he has proclaimed all these things, he announces hope, and they kill him for it. Again, then let's go to the other minor prophets. Hosea, which is a personal favorite of mine. Hosea is from about 750 to 722. Hosea is in the northern kingdom. Remember that the kingdom splits after Solomon in about 700s, late 700s BC. What he does is he mirrors God's relationship with the people. He marries a temple prostitute, but later, no matter how unfaithful she is, he takes her back in and uses words like honeymoon. God's love wins out. Remember, we had the guy who had the placard that said, "The end is near." Well, think of Hosea as turning that placard around, writing in, "God is love." Joel. Joel is, I think, an interesting prophet for today because he writes at a time when we are under plague. Remember, plague is a kind of judgment. There's a judgment. There is a plague of locusts. And a lot of his writing will be used again by Peter. Peter will talk about God is doing a new thing. We always use Joel, Ash Wednesday. Amos. Amos is a lot earlier. Think of Joel a lot later. Joel in the, let's say, the 600s. Amos is one of the earliest. He's about 1750 to 750 to 722. He's in the northern kingdom. He talks about people being unfaithful to God, and he's in the southern kingdom, unfaithful to God, taking advantage of the poor, and we'll talk about this later. I just want to give you an overview. He's also the first one we know what his occupation is. He's a dresser of sycamore trees. Amos, we've talked about. Amos, again, is of that family in the 760s. Amos warns against arrogance, things like that. Obadiah. Obadiah is one chapter, okay? One chapter. But in this chapter, he talks about the wrath coming down on the Edomites. And we all know who the Edomites are. They're the descendants of Jacob's brother. You know, when you have lousy relationships, this is what happens. Jonah. Jonah is the beginning, along with Isaiah, of the universality that God is a God for all people, and that God hears us, loves us no matter where we are. And then we skip to Nahum. Nahum is 663, 612. That God is against Assyria. God will destroy Assyria, contrary to all the power relationships, all the treaties. It's going to fall, and Babylon will replace it. Of course, that's like saying, we've cured you of the measles, but guess what? You've got Sheshinski's disease, and no one has ever had Sheshinski's disease but Sheshinsky, and he wrote down almost all the symptoms, and then he died. Zephaniah. Nope. Who we got next? We got Micah. Micah's interesting because Micah is one of the last prophets. Remember, these prophets are all in the Hebrew book of the scroll of prophecy. All 12 of them are written down. Micah is also from the southern kingdom, about 730, 715. He's the one that has been quoted by politicians. What does the Lord require of you? That you would walk humbly and serve and love your God. Micah also is the one who talks about Bethlehem being where the Messiah comes from, out of David's line. It's coming to you, Bethlehem, because you are open to the promise of God. Nahum, again, one of those one-shot wonders. Well, we've talked about Habakkuk. Habakkuk is the one that says, whatever happens, I will erect a watchtower and wait for the Lord. Habakkuk is someone who, amidst the chaos, trust God. Unencumbered by the rational thought process, trust God. It's a dialogue of faith. It's an encounter that is rare. We forget Habakkuk at our peril. Zephaniah 640 to 609. God will punish, but God will move us from punishment to hope. And then announces that the Messiah, the chosen one, will come mounted on the colt of an ass, and palm trees will be cut into fronds and laid down. Palm Sunday, Haggai. Haggai is the 520s. He is an encouragement to rebuild. In a sense, he takes over from Isaiah, that our rebuilders will outnumber our ruiners, and this new and wondrous thing will happen. Zechariah. Zechariah is about the same period. It's a dreamlike visitation of God walking through the lands, rebuilding. And last but not least, Malachi. Malachi writes about the intersection of God and man, that God is doing a new creation, that God is doing new things. And there are references to the Romans coming in it. Those are the minor prophets. And do you have the slide for the Woodhouse quote? Or okay. Again, here's a good way to remember it. Samuel, Nathan, and I forgot Elijah and Elisha. They're in that first set. Then you have the fall of the northern kingdom. You have the 600s, and you'll see all of them. Remember the big event. It's the destruction of the temple that Ezekiel really talks about. He talks about God leaving the temple and doing something new outside, but amidst all this death and destruction, amidst the valley of the dry bones in Babylon, God does God's new thing. God is going to make everything new. Now, why is this important for us? Again, Matthew and John the Divine used the prophets hundreds of times. Matthew, this was in order that this would be fulfilled. Luke uses it an equal amount. Luke also works in the Old Testament prophets to speak the truth, to speak a dynamic that is new. Remember, the prophets are moving us from judgment to hope. Judgment is what we're going to get if we keep on our course. Simple. If you keep eating piles of junk food, things will happen. If you smoke this, if you do this, prophets point us to the consequences, but they also encourage us to change. Again, think of someone like Rachel Carson, who says, this is what's going on, but this is what could be. Anyone else want to name any prophets that they know? Dr. King would be one. We can go on and on. The prophet makes us remember. Remember what we have been. But know you this. This is what we could be if we allow God to work through us. That the punishments that we are going through are not the final word. Do you not know? Have you not heard? I am doing a new thing, is what Joel says again and again and again. The dry bones will live in Ezekiel. I want you to think too that even at its most horrible, judgmental stuff, Nathan says, you've been unfaithful, but God has not. God will be faithful, and God will work through sinful humankind to make a Messiah. Jeremiah says, I will make for you a new law, a law that you can break all you want, but my law is forever. God is love. Think of God going into a new business. If you like the following thing, you will love. You will love these new things. As I always say, but wait, there's more. Any questions so far? Any questions? Aha. Well, I was hoping for more questions and more comments and more folks, but don't worry, this is all recorded. We're going to take a look at Isaiah because Isaiah is important. Isaiah is where everything, in a sense, meets the road. Isaiah will take us and his school of prophecy through all times. He is the running thread. He and his school. I kind of look at it this way. Isaiah handed his business over to Junior. Junior handed it over to Secundus. And hundreds of years of prophecy being handed down. There's some texts I want you to look at. And if you don't get to them, I'm not going to be upset. But I want you to focus on Isaiah 9 and Isaiah 40. These are entire chapters. Don't worry, we won't spend all night on them. And then take a look at Isaiah 1 through 8 and 39:6. Remember Isaiah's great call in the temple. Whom shall I send? Isaiah probably looked around and said, uh, me, I guess, me. God levels things. God shakes the temple. God talks about fire. But in that fire, he talks about growth, about God making the stumps into great trees, of God transplanting, of God doing things that are mind-boggling. God is not wacko. We're wacko for not trusting in God. As Chico Marx used to say, hey, who are you going to believe, me or your own eyes? Isaiah asks us to suspend the rational thought process. Remember, King Ahaz has sacrificed his only son, the only hope of the kingdom, to a pagan god. And Isaiah comes out and says to the king, with blood on his hands, the smell of burning flesh, which if you've ever smelt it is absolutely horrible. God will do a new thing. You want to know how crazy it is? A virgin will conceive. This child will be called Emmanuel. That's in that 9th chapter. Any questions? Any questions? Comments? You?
Can you hear me?
I sure can, John.
No questions. I'm just listening. Thank you.
Anything you want me to flesh out a little bit more, or things? I'm here. It's just you and me.
Okay.
Just you and me, and actually Jennifer is working this. She's the wizard of this all. And
Okay.
Orson is providing comments.
Tilt the camera up just a little bit more because you're missing your forehead.
Ah, well.
Yeah, can't do that. Okay, there
we go.
That's it. Good.
Now that's what you look like without your mask on.
Oh, good. Okay. Continue on, enjoying
well,
it.
I was going to stop there. I expected more people, and you know how discussion gets with our group. They're always willing to take it in another direction, which I love dearly.
Okay. Pam's coming home. She had to get a hair.
Right, that's what she said. That's what she
said.
She'll
be back. Okay.
Okay. Well, we're going to start. We'll see you maybe Wednesday for communion, and then Thursday we're going to start with Isaiah. So get the word out. And this is all recorded, so people won't ask me to totally repeat everything I said.
Okay.
But I hope this gives you a feel of what I'm going to do.
Yes.
You know, especially in these times when we think we're under judgment, but we may be under judgment, but most importantly, we're under hope. Hope always triumphs.
Yeah.
And against rational thought, God is doing a new thing. Have you not known? Do you not yet perceive? Which is kind of the, Jesus uses that formula too in Mark. 18 times in 4 chapters. Do you not yet understand? Think of Moe and the Three Stooges. Come here, you. You don't get it, do you? Think of that. You know, God asking us to be new and think different thoughts. That the final word is not death, destruction, mayhem. The final word is grace and love. Think of, you were an attorney. There's punishment, but if you do all this stuff, everything is expunged. You can start anew again. There's
One
this
time.
great, what?
One time.
One time. There's this great quote that I think it was Sarah put on the bulletin board long ago. Though your sins be scarlet, I will make them white as snow. That's really, in a sense, what God's up to. We got to confront things, but in doing that, grace is offered. I hope that makes sense. I want to just get us out of the idea that the prophets are God's cosmic bullies, and you're doomed to go and don't forget I told you so. That what we see here is an unfolding of hope. That sounds like Pam.
Yeah, here's Pam's home now.
Okay. Well, listen, we'll see you later. So hope to see you Wednesday when I do communion, and then Thursday. Get the word out.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
Stay in trouble. Make good trouble.
Yes.
Hi.
Hello, Pam. How are you?
Good.
I'm just finishing up because you guys are the only ones.
Oh,
But it's all recorded, so folks can go online. Where will it
Okay.
be on the?
I'll send her an
well, send me
email.
the link.
You got it. You got
Okay.
it.
Okay.
And it will last
I didn't
longer. It
get
was
it
a half an hour, but it was just John and I and Jennifer and Orson. And Orson didn't want to ask any questions today.
How about the girls? There are all three here. They didn't
Oh.
talk either?
Yeah, they chatted a little bit.
Yeah. Well, say hi
They
to
let me
Jennifer
know you
for
were
us.
home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
incidentally, how do I put this? They were the prophecy. Well, Mom may not be here, but she is coming with treats and new
I told
hair.
him, I said, I'll get right back. I won't talk.
Well, I'll tell you, yesterday was the 1-year anniversary of our youngest son not having his hair cut.
Oh my gosh.
He looks like something that would appear in National Geographic 50, 60 years ago.
Oh, I'm glad mine didn't do that.
I've
My
had one
girlfriend's-
haircut. That's my big treat when
Well,
couple
John's had a
weeks.
couple,
Yeah.
yeah.
but I'm his barber, so.
Yes, I have this. I've never had my hair this long ever in my life.
Well, it doesn't look bad.
No, that's because I
There you
take
go.
care of it. Well, have a blessed day.
You too.
God
too.
bless.
Say hi to
And
Jennifer.
we'll get the word out next Thursday. Same bad
Okay.
time, same bad channel. I have the homework on, so everybody, this is the first time. Things don't always go
Okay.
right.
Sure.
Yeah, well, and maybe they didn't know how to do it.